My father is dying, and I just found out that was never the worst of it. 10 days. I have 10 days to produce a husband, documented, legal, certified, or lose every building, every fund, every 40-year-old proof that my father loved me, to a woman who has been in his life for 3 years and in his will for 2. I have managed a vampire king's empire without breaking. I have held rooms together that should have collapsed. And right now I am sitting on the floor of my office at 11 at night talking to a photograph in a building I thought was empty. I was wrong about that last part. If you have ever been the one who holds everything together for everyone for years and then found yourself on the floor with nothing left to hold, stay. This one is for you. And if stories like this find you when you need them, subscribe. I'll be here when the next one does. The last time I saw my father fully conscious, he told me he was proud of me. I said, "I know, Papa." The way you say it when someone has said it enough times that you have stopped letting it land. The way you say it when you are already reaching for your keys, already calculating the drive to the airport, already back inside the version of yourself that does not have time to receive things. I said I know, and I left. That was 4 months ago. The hospital room smelled like the particular absence of everything, the chemical version of neutral, the air that has been cleaned so many times it has forgotten what it used to be. Hector Lopez was smaller than I remembered. Not thinner, smaller, the way people get when the thing holding them upright begins to release its grip. His hands on the blanket were the same hands that had signed my first lease, carried me through a fever at 3 in the morning, pointed at a building once and said, "One day that will be yours." His eyes were closed. I sat next to him for 40 minutes. I did not cry. I organized my breathing into something that could pass for calm, and I watched the monitor, and I did not cry, because crying in the hospital felt like something I had not earned permission for yet. Dolores, the housekeeper who had worked for my father since before I was born, found me in the corridor afterward. She was holding a phone like it was something she needed to give back.
"He wanted me to keep this," she said.
He recorded it himself. I don't know what's on it. He told me to give it to you when you came. I put in my earbuds in the elevator. 12 minutes and 40 seconds. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the space between my ears, and I stood completely still as the elevator descended, as the lobby doors opened onto a Des Moines evening that smelled like rain already spent. The first 4 minutes were his voice, unhurried, telling me about the inheritance clause. He had put it in 10 years ago. He explained it gently, the way he explained everything, with the patience of a man who believed that understanding was always available if you took the time. "I only want to see you settled, Mija.
Happy.
I didn't want you to wait until I was gone to let yourself have a life." The clause required a marriage certificate. Verified.
Filed.
Within 10 days of his passing or formal incapacitation. He had meant it as a wish. Then, at the 4-minute mark, the recording shifted. My father's voice stopped, and 2 other voices began. I know Briella's laugh. I have heard it at family dinners, at his birthday, at the hospital last week when she put her hand on his arm and told the nurse she was his wife. Technically true, technically the point. Her laugh is the kind that knows it is being watched. I have never heard it like this. She and Conrad Ashby, my father's attorney, spoke for 8 minutes. I stood on the sidewalk outside the hospital in the cooling air, and I listened to all of it. The clause was not a problem, Conrad said. It was leverage. The 10-day window was already narrowing. Hector's condition had been downgraded that afternoon, a detail neither of them had mentioned to me. If the incapacitation filing went through tonight, the clock would start without me knowing. Briella asked how certain he was. "Certain enough," he said. "She's single. She's been single for years. She lives for that job. 10 days is not enough time for a woman like her." The recording ended. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment. A car moved past. The rain had started again, light and indifferent, and I did not move out of it. Then I got into my car, drove to Ethelred Corpse Tower on Locust Street, badged through security, and took the elevator to the 40th floor. Not to work.
I want to be clear about that.
I knew, somewhere below the part of me that was still functioning in straight lines, that I could not go back to the hotel room. The hotel room was where I would have to sit with it. The office was where things got solved, and I did not know how to solve this yet, but being somewhere that had ever seen me solve things felt necessary in a way I could not articulate. The floor was quiet. The cleaning crew had come and gone. The city pressed itself against the glass 40 floors down, headlights moving through the wet streets, traffic signals cycling through their colors for nobody. I sat at my desk. I opened my laptop. I closed it. I made coffee in the break room and left the cup on the counter. I came back, moved a stack of folders from the right side of my desk to the left, then moved them back. Then I sat down on the floor. Not because I was tired, because standing felt like a claim I was no longer sure I had the right to make. My father's photograph lived on the corner of my desk, the one from his 65th birthday, him laughing at something off camera, the kind of laugh that happens before the person knows someone is taking a picture. I had always kept it there because it was the most honest image I had of him. The one where he was not being a father or a billionaire or a man watching his legacy, just a person who was happy to be alive. I took it off the desk. I held it.
They're going to take it, I said. To him.
To the photograph of him. To the version of him that existed before everything began narrowing. Everything you built. They already have the paperwork. They have a lawyer, and they have the clock, and they have a clause you wrote because you loved me, and they're going to use it like a door they're closing in my face. My voice was steady. That surprised me. I don't know what to do. The steadiness held for 3 more words. Then it didn't. I don't know what to do, Papa, and you're the person I would call. The room was very quiet. The particular quiet of a building that believes itself empty. It was not empty. I became aware of it the way you become aware of a sound that has been present for several seconds before you register it, a shift in the quality of the silence near the corridor, a weight in the air by the doorway that had not been there before. I did not turn around. I was not ready to be seen yet. And somewhere deeper, below the part of me that managed things and held rooms together and kept my face neutral in front of men who needed me to be impervious, somewhere below all of that, I already knew who was standing there. Zach Reeves had been my employer for 6 years. I knew the particular way he occupied a room, the way the air around him rearranged itself with a kind of deference that had nothing to do with his money or his title, everything to do with something older. He said nothing. I stayed on the floor for another 3 seconds. Then I stood, set my father's photograph carefully back on the desk, and turned around. He was in the doorway. White suit, silver gray tie, his hair the color of old snow. He looked, as he always looked, like a man who has had a long time to get comfortable with the weight of things. He was not pretending he had not heard. 10 days, I said. He looked at me for a long moment. Not with pity, that was the thing about Zach. In 6 years, he had never once looked at me with pity. Tell me, he said. I told him everything. That is the part one still cannot fully account for. I have worked for Zach Reeves for 6 years. I know how to be useful in his presence. Precise, prepared, 3 steps ahead of whatever he needs before he names it. What I do not know how to be, in front of him, is undone. Yet there I was, standing in my own office at 11:30 at night with rain on the glass and my father's photograph behind me, telling my employer about a recording, a clause, a woman who married an old man and started counting his assets before he finished dying. I told him about Conrad Ashby's voice on that recording. The certainty in it. 10 days is not enough time for a woman like her. I told him about the filing that would start the clock the moment my father was declared incapacitated, which, by Dolores's account, had already happened at 6 that evening while I was still in the air over Ohio. I told him about the properties. The medical endowment. 40 years of my father's life converted into things that could be transferred, liquidated, redirected, if one box on a piece of paper remained unchecked. I did not tell him what my father had sounded like on that recording. The gentleness of it. I only want to see you happy, Mija. I did not tell him that part because I did not trust what would happen if I said it aloud. Zach listened the way he always listened, without moving, without performing attention, in the way of someone for whom paying attention has always been a matter of survival. When I finished, the room held the particular quiet of a sentence just ended. He said, "How many days remain?"
9.
As of midnight. He looked at me for a moment. Not past me, not through me. At me, the way he occasionally looked at things he was deciding the true weight of. "Marry me," he said. 3 words. No preamble. No softening. I laughed. It came out wrong. Too sharp, too close to the other thing. "You don't," I stopped. Tried again. "You're not serious." "I am rarely anything else." Zach. The use of his name in that register felt like a small trespass. I almost never used it without a title attached. "You understand what you're saying." "I understand it precisely." He moved from the doorway then, just 2 steps into the room, and stopped. He did not come closer than that, did not presume anything the space between us had not yet offered. "You need a marriage certificate, filed and verified, within 9 days. I have the resources to make that possible. The legal process is a problem I can solve by morning." "Why would you?" It was not really a question. It came out flat, the way things come out when you are too tired to inflect them properly. He was quiet for a moment. "Because what they are doing is a particular kind of theft I have seen before. Many times. And I am tired of watching it." Something in my chest went very still. Not because it was romantic. Because it was true. I could hear the difference. "I need conditions," I said. He tilted his head, a fraction. "Waiting." I pulled a sheet of Ethelred Corp letterhead from the printer tray. My hands were steady.
I noted that.
I sat down, uncapped a pen, and wrote while I spoke. Separate lives within any shared space. No expectations. No access to anything I have not explicitly offered. I wrote as I listed. The scratch of the pen was the loudest thing in the room. "My father's estate is managed by me, not directed by you if we win. If we don't win, we dissolve the arrangement cleanly with no financial claim on either side." I looked up. "And you tell me the real reason. Not tonight, if you're not ready. But before we walk into any courtroom. I will not stand next to someone whose motivations I cannot account for." He looked at the letterhead. Then at me. "Agreed," he said. "All of it." I pushed the paper across the desk. He read it the way he read contracts, completely, without rushing, without performing speed. Then he signed at the bottom, his signature moving with the assurance of something that has long since stopped needing to prove itself. He pushed it back. I signed beneath his name. The stillness after that was different from all the other stillnesses that night. Those had been the quiet of things falling. This was the quiet of something placed deliberately on a surface and released. He straightened. "I'll have my attorney contact the county clerk's office. We can file by 8. My father. My voice did something I had not cleared it to do. I corrected. "I need to be at the hospital by 7. We will be."
We.
I did not look at him when he said it. I looked at the letterhead on my desk, at our 2 signatures sitting below a paragraph I had written on the floor of a grief I had not finished having yet, and I understood very clearly that I had just done something I could not undo. The terrible part, the part one did not say, did not write, did not let cross my face, was that it did not feel like a mistake. It felt like the first decision in 2 days that I had made, without my hands shaking.
He left.
I stayed. The rain kept moving across the glass in long diagonal lines, and the city below went on running its headlights through the dark, and I sat in my chair for a very long time, not moving, just holding the specific weight of a choice I had made with my eyes open. 9 days. Whatever came next, it started now. I slept 2 hours on the office couch, and woke before my alarm. That is how I knew the night had done something to me. I do not wake before alarms. I have trained myself over 15 years to extract every minute of available rest, to close the door on the day, and not open it again until the number on the clock authorizes it. Efficiency, even in sleep. My eyes opened at 5:43, and I lay there for a moment, fully conscious, staring at the ceiling tiles of my own office, thinking, Today, I am getting married. The thought had no texture to it yet. No weight. It sat in my mind the way a word does when you have said it so many times it stops meaning anything. I got up, smoothed my suit, went to the hospital. My father's room was quieter than the night before. The monitor's sound turned lower, the light through the window still the flat gray of early morning. Dolores was in the chair by the door, already awake. She looked at me the way she had looked at me since I was 7 years old, like she knew more than she was going to say, and had made her peace with that. I sat beside him for 20 minutes. His breathing was slower. Not worse, the nurse had said. Just slower, the body finding its new tempo. I held his hand. His hand was warm. I have a plan, I told him. Quietly. Not a confession this time, a report. The kind I used to give him when I was small, and wanted him to know I had thought things through. It's a strange plan. You might have opinions about it. He did not stir. I think you'd like him, actually. I paused. He doesn't waste words. I let go of his hand carefully, the way you set something down that you are not sure you have the right to keep holding. Then I went downstairs, and Zach was already waiting in the car. Petra Dunmore was the kind of attorney who made you feel that the law was simply a system of doors, and she had memorized every lock. She met us at the county clerk's office at 8:15 with a leather briefcase and no pleasantries, which I respected enormously. The paperwork was already prepared. I read everything. All of it. Zach stood 2 feet away, and Petra stood 2 feet from him, and the clerk sat behind her window looking at her screen, and I stood at the counter and read every line of every form because I was not going to sign anything I had not cleared myself, not today, not after what I had heard on a recording the night before. No one rushed me. That, too, I noted. The ceremony, if you could call it that, took 11 minutes. A room with fluorescent lighting and a laminate counter, and a clerk who had performed this service so many times she had stripped it to its pure components. The words required, the acknowledgement, the record.
We stood side by side.
He signed first. I watched his hand move across the paper and understood, with a clarity I had not expected, that this signature had existed longer than my country. Not dramatically, just as a fact, sitting quietly inside the act of watching a pen move. The signature of a man who has signed things in rooms that no longer exist, for purposes the history books recorded incorrectly. Then the pen was in my hand. I signed. The clerk said the words. I do not remember them exactly, the specific words, I mean. What I remember is the quality of the air in the room when they were finished, the way the fluorescent light hummed its single note, and did not care at all what had just happened here. Married. Petra said, certified copies will be ready within the hour. I'll file the state response simultaneously. Zach said, good. Neither of them looked at me the way people look at brides. This was not that. I was grateful for that. The stillness came in the car on the way to the courthouse. We were not speaking. There was nothing urgent to say. Petra was handling the filing by phone from the back seat, and the city was moving past the windows the way cities do in early morning, ordinary and indifferent. And I was sitting in the front passenger seat of a car that smelled faintly of old wood and cold metal, and I was wearing yesterday's suit, and I was someone's wife, and my father was dying 2 miles away. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm. Not hard. Just to feel the point of it. It is done, I thought. Whatever comes next, this part is done. The courthouse steps came into view. And there was Briella. She was standing on the 3rd step from the bottom, speaking to Conrad Ashby, her coat too light for the morning chill, her hair perfect. I had met her 4 times. Each time she had looked at me with a particular kind of warmth, curated, directed, the warmth of someone who has calculated that warmth serves a purpose. She saw the car. She saw me in it. Then she looked past me to the driver's side, and her expression did something small and fast that she covered immediately. But not quite fast enough. She had not known about Zach. Whatever Conrad had told her about my options, about the kind of woman I was and what 10 days would and would not be enough time for, he had not accounted for this. I watched her recover, watched her say something to Conrad, low and quick. I got out of the car. The morning air was cold and tasted like rain from the night before. The battle, I understood, was no longer hidden. It was right here on these steps, in the space between her eyes and mine. We were not allies. We were never going to be. Now, finally, we both knew it. The first hearing lasted 4 hours and resolved nothing. That is the nature of the opening move in a legal fight, not to win but to establish the shape of the board. Conrad was skilled at this. He did not overreach. He filed procedural objections with the patience of a man who understood that patience itself was a weapon, that making the other side respond was its own kind of erosion. Petra matched him point for point, filed our marriage certificate, and the property deed Zach had already transferred into both our names, and when we walked out into the afternoon, we were not further ahead than we had been. We were, however, not behind. I told myself that was enough for day one. Zach's Des Moines residence was on a street of Victorian houses near the river, the kind of street that has decided what it is and declined all further suggestions. The house was built in 1887. I know this because the year is carved into the stone above the front door, and because nothing about the interior has ever been explained to me. It is simply there, fully formed, like a sentence that does not require context. High ceilings. Floors that announce every step. Windows that face the right direction for the light to come in horizontal and amber in the late afternoon, which is a specific kind of beauty I was not prepared for. My room was on the second floor. His was somewhere. I had not asked. The conditions on the letterhead were holding, which meant we were two people sharing a house the way planets share a solar system. Proximate, governed by the same rules, not touching. This suited me. I told myself it suited me. The days between hearings had a structure I imposed because I needed one. Morning at the hospital. Afternoons at Ethelred, because the company did not pause for my personal disasters. Evenings reviewing estate documents, cross-referencing Conrad's filings, looking for the seam where he had been careless. Zach worked at the same hours I did. We passed in doorways. We ate at the same table twice, not by arrangement, just by the geometry of two people who kept similar hours in a house that had one kitchen. He did not attempt conversation at those meals. Neither did I. The silence between us was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who had learned that words were for precision, not for filling space, and who had decided, separately, that this was something they had in common. I noticed things about him in the way you notice things when you are not allowing yourself to look directly. The way he read, completely still, the book flat on the table, not held. The way he turned off lights when he left a room, every single time, with the automatic discipline of someone who formed habits in an era when light cost something. The way he answered his phone in a language I did not recognize twice, his voice lower in it than in English, something in the cadence suggesting it was not a language he used for anything pleasant. I was not watching him. I was simply observant by training. There is a difference. The third night I could not sleep. This was not unusual. I had not slept fully since Des Moines, since Dolores and the phone, and 12 minutes of other people's plans. My body had adjusted to operating at a deficit, running itself on black coffee, and the specific fuel of having too much to lose to rest. 2 a.m. I went to the kitchen for water. The kitchen was dark, and he was in it, not sitting, just standing at the counter with his hands resting on the edge of it, looking out the window at the yard below, where the oak tree moved in the cold without making a sound. He was in a white shirt, no jacket, which was the least formal I had ever seen him. He did not startle when I came in. Of course he didn't. I got my water, stood at the other end of the counter. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car moved down the street and was gone. I said it before I had decided to say it. Why did you really do this? Not a new question. The same question from the letterhead, the one he had agreed to answer before any courtroom. He was quiet for a moment, not evasive, considering. My mother, he said, came to this country with a deed to a piece of land. Her husband's family contested it after he died. The court found in their favor. He paused. She had done everything correctly, built everything correctly. The law was simply not designed to protect her from people who knew how to use it. The refrigerator kept humming. That was 1931, he said. I looked at the window. The oak tree. You've been angry about it for 90 years, I said. Longer. A beat. Anger is the wrong word. It is more like a record. I keep one. He turned from the window then, and his eyes met mine in the dark kitchen, and I understood in a way that was not romantic and not professional but something older than either. I understood that this man was not helping me because I was in front of him. He was helping me because this particular injustice had a shape he recognized, a shape he had been cataloging across decades, and he had decided long ago what he did when he encountered it. I had not been rescued. I had been witnessed. The difference mattered enormously to me.
I did not know how to say that.
I did not try. Good night, I said, and took my water and went upstairs. I lay in the dark for a long time after. Not restless. Still. The particular stillness of a belief beginning to loosen its grip. I had been so certain he wanted something I could not see yet. I was less certain now. That terrified me more than the certainty had. I had been less certain of Zach's motives for 4 days, and in those 4 days I had become a worse version of myself in court. Not visibly. No one watching would have seen it. I was still precise, still prepared, still 3 answers ahead of every question Petra anticipated. The file I had built on Conrad's procedural patterns was 12 pages long and color-coded. I knew the estate documents better than Conrad did. I had grown up inside them, understood not just the numbers, but the reasoning behind every decision my father had made, the particular way he thought about legacy and risk and what was worth protecting. The problem was not my preparation. The problem was that somewhere between the kitchen at 2 in the morning and the second hearing, I had let something relax that I could not afford to relax. A muscle I had kept contracted for so long, I had forgotten it was doing work. The certainty that everyone wanted something I could not see yet, that certainty had been load-bearing. Without it, I was standing in a room I thought I knew, and the floor felt different under my feet. I walked into the second hearing 3 days after the kitchen, and I was not braced the way I should have been. Conrad had been waiting for exactly that. He produced the letter 40 minutes into the proceedings. It was in an envelope, standard legal presentation, handled with the careful neutrality of something he wanted the judge to notice him being careful with. He described it as a personal correspondence from Hector Lopez, recently discovered among estate documents in the family home, dated 6 weeks before his incapacitation. Petra objected to the chain of custody. The judge allowed it provisionally. I knew my father's handwriting. Not just the shape of the letters, the pressure of them, the way he bore down on a pen like the page might try to escape, the particular slant that had been the same since I was a child tracing it on birthday cards. I knew his handwriting the way, I knew the sound of his voice. The letter was his cadence. His phrasing. The specific way he constructed a sentence when he was being careful not to wound. It was not him. I knew it before I finished the first paragraph. The words were right, the rhythm was almost right, but the weight was wrong, the way a piece of music is almost a song you recognize until you realize someone has changed the key. The letter expressed, gently, methodically, doubt.
About the clause.
About whether he had been wrong to tie his daughter's inheritance to a condition she had shown no interest in meeting. About whether Briella, who had been present and devoted in ways his daughter had not been able to be, deserved greater consideration. I sat at the plaintiff's table and read every word. My hands were flat on the table. Very still. Miss Lopez, Mrs. Reeves, Conrad said, correcting himself with a precision that was itself a small knife. Did your father ever discuss revising the terms of the inheritance clause with you? No, I said. Did he ever express to you, privately, any reservations about whether the clause was still appropriate given your pause, calibrated lifestyle and choices?
No.
The letter before the court suggests otherwise. I looked at the letter. Then I looked at Conrad. He had the composed expression of a man who had won before and knew what winning looked like from the inside. That letter is not my father's, I said. The courtroom did not react visibly. The judge made a note. Petra straightened, and I could hear in the slight shift of her chair that she was recalibrating. Conrad smiled with one side of his mouth. Mrs. Reeves, grief can make us resistant to. I am not grieving in your direction, I said. I am telling you that letter is a forgery. The recess came 20 minutes later. In the corridor, Zach stood 2 feet from me while Petra made calls, and the silence between us was the particular kind that forms when 2 people are watching the same thing and have not yet decided what to call it. The handwriting, I said. I know. He was already on his phone. That was all. No reassurance. No performance of calm. Just, I know. I'm moving. And the thing I had been trying not to need, the thing I had closed every exit against for 15 years, walked right through the wall I had built, quiet as a man who makes almost no sound when he moves. 32 minutes later, Petra had a forensic document examiner on a video call. The hearing reconvened. The examiner's preliminary findings were entered into the record. Inconsistencies in baseline pen pressure, letter formation deviating from authenticated Hector Lopez documents at 17 measurable points. The letter was a forgery. Conrad moved immediately to a procedural challenge. The judge tabled the letter pending full analysis and called a recess until the following week. We had not won. We had stopped losing, which is a different thing. Outside, in the parking structure, Petra took a call and stepped away. I stood next to the car and pulled out my phone and looked at the notification I had been not looking at since that morning. The toxicology report I had commissioned 3 days after arriving in Des Moines, quietly, through a medical contact, telling myself it was thoroughness, telling myself my father's rapid decline simply warranted review, had come back. I read it twice. The medication levels were wrong. Not dangerously wrong in the way of accident or dosage error. Wrong in the way of intervention. Consistent, according to the consultant's note at the bottom, with gradual administration over a period of weeks. The cold that moved through me was not shock. Shock is a kind of protection. This was not that. This was the specific feeling of a thing you already knew somewhere refusing to stay where you had put it. My father had not simply declined. Someone had been helping him toward the end. I stood in the parking structure with the report on my phone and the fluorescent light overhead and the distant sound of the city outside, and I did not move for a long time. Not grief.
Not yet.
Something colder and much more awake. The week between hearings was the quietest I have ever spent. Not peaceful. Quiet the way a held breath is quiet, the body doing nothing externally while everything inside runs at a speed it was not designed to sustain. I went to the hospital every morning. My father's breathing had stabilized at something the doctors called a plateau, which meant nothing was getting worse and nothing was getting better, and we were simply waiting for the next thing to happen. I sat with him and held his hand and did not tell him about the toxicology report, because there was nothing to tell that would not have required me to say something I was not ready to say aloud. I had given the report to Petra the morning after the parking structure. She had read it once, set it on her desk, and said, "I'll need 3 days." I had said, "You have 6." She had used 4. The final hearing was on a Thursday. Des Moines in late October smells like cold soil and something mineral in the air, the specific scent of a city preparing for a season that does not negotiate. I noticed it on the courthouse steps. I notice strange things when I am managing myself. The smell of a morning, the sound of my own footsteps, the exact weight of a file under my arm. I was managing myself very carefully that day. Inside, the courtroom had the usual assembled quality of a proceeding where everyone knows more than they are saying and is waiting to see who says it first. Conrad was already at the respondent's table. Briella sat behind him in the gallery, her coat dark, her expression the composed kind that takes effort. Zach sat beside me at the plaintiff's table, not touching, present. Petra stood and began. She did not open with the toxicology report. She opened with the forged letter, the completed forensic analysis, delivered without drama, 17 documented points of deviation from authenticated Hector Lopez handwriting, conclusion unambiguous. She placed it in front of the judge with the same manner she used for every document, which was the manner of someone who understood that the way you present the truth matters as much as the truth itself. Conrad objected twice. Both times the judge overruled, without looking up. Then Petra called the hospital's night pharmacist, a woman named Gretchen Farrow, who had worked the overnight rotation for 11 years and had, 3 weeks before my father's rapid decline, flagged an anomaly in his medication reconciliation to her supervisor. The flag had been filed. No action had been taken. She had kept her copy. She testified for 22 minutes. I watched Briella's face for all 22 of them. Composure is a performance. Every performance has a seam. I have spent 15 years working for a man who never raised his voice and never needed to, learning to read the quality of a silence rather than its volume. I watched Briella's hands in her lap move from folded to clasped to one thumbnail pressing into the opposite palm, and I knew exactly what I was watching. The orderly came next. A young man who had been present during 3 of my father's overnight assessments in the final weeks, who had noticed a woman matching Briella's description in the corridor twice in the early hours, who had not thought it significant at the time, who had thought about it every day since. Conrad began his challenge, and the judge stopped him with 2 words. Sit down. The stillness in the room at that moment was the kind I had been waiting for without knowing I was waiting for it, the particular quality of air when a proceeding tips and everyone present feels the tipping. Conrad knew. I could see him know. He conferred with his associate in a low voice, and I watched the conference, and I watched the moment he accepted what was coming, which looked like a man setting down something heavy he has been carrying a long way. The judge reviewed Petra's compiled documentation for 11 minutes. The courtroom held its breath around her, which a room of that size is surprisingly capable of doing. Then she looked up. She found Conrad first, then Briella, then me. I am remanding this matter to criminal investigation pending formal review, she said. Officers of the court will detain both respondents pending arraignment. 2 officers moved from the side of the room. Briella stood. She looked at me across the courtroom, the full length of it, nothing between us, and her expression was not what I expected. Not defiance. Not collapse. Something almost like recognition, the look of a person who has spent a long time not being seen clearly and has been seen clearly at last. I held her gaze. Then the officer touched her arm, and she turned, and she was gone. The estate ruling came 12 minutes after the criminal remand. Full restoration. My father's properties, his endowment, 40 years of a man's life made into buildings and legacy, and the particular proof that he had loved me, returned, by court order, to where he had always intended them to be. Petra said something I did not hear. I nodded. Outside. I needed to be outside. The courthouse steps in October. The cold air came off the river 2 blocks away, and the sky was the flat white of a day that has nothing more to prove. I stood on the 3rd step from the bottom, the same step I had watched Briella stand on, the morning this all became visible, and I pressed my hands together in front of me, and I thought, he is gone. Not the legal battle. My father. The thing I had been managing myself against for 3 weeks cracked open without warning, and I did not have time to close it before it was already happening. Not loudly, not the way grief performs itself for an audience, but the quiet, involuntary kind, the kind that comes from somewhere below decision. Zach's hand found mine. Not a gesture. Not comfort offered for consideration. Just there.
Warm. Steady.
The way a wall is steady when you need to lean against something, and have not asked permission. I did not pull away. I stood on those steps and let myself come apart for the first time since a hospital corridor in Des Moines, and I held onto his hand, and the city moved around us, indifferent and ordinary, and exactly the right thing to be. Des Moines doesn't look like a city that holds secrets. That is precisely why they keep coming here. 10 days had been enough. Not to fix everything. Not to stop grieving. Not to understand what came next between the man beside me and the woman I was becoming in all of this. But enough to stand. Enough to hold on. Enough to know that the worst of it was behind me, and that I had not come through it alone. If this story found you at the right moment, if some part of it knew you before you knew it, there are others like you here. Women who needed something that didn't look away. Subscribe, and you won't lose this place. It will be here the next time you need it.